Let's rock and roll. Hi guys, my name is Paul Quinn. I am the founder and CEO of Westport Partners, an executive search firm, and Quintessential Coaching, an online career intelligence platform. We help professionals that won't settle for second best. I'm married to an incredible and amazingly accomplished woman, and I'm a father to 3 beautiful children. I'm an entrepreneur, a recruiter, and a lifelong martial artist. I grew up believing that the world rewards people that back themselves. My parents taught me that, and it has stuck. 30 plus years in talent management, a different era. No LinkedIn, no algorithms, just relationships, instinct, and relentless grind. I worked full-time throughout college and university. I didn't come from wealth or powerful connections, I built them. In 2001, at the age of 23, I moved to Singapore. That decision changed my life. Asia was opening up, private banking was booming, and I found myself right in the middle of it. In 2005, I co-founded Nisis, which would later become Westport Partners, operating across the Asia-Pacific region, the Middle East, Europe, and North America. Over the next 2 decades, I traveled between Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, London, Dublin, New York, and beyond. Building trust, making placements, learning what separates the people who reach the top from those who almost do. I help individuals and organizations make some of the most important decisions of their careers and their businesses. Over the course of my entrepreneurial journey, I've overseen more than 1,000 placements, 30 years of pattern recognition, 20 years of lessons as an entrepreneur. But then I asked myself a question that changed everything. What if I could take everything that I know and give it to the people who need it most? Not just the privileged few with access to elite headhunters or a personal coach. Everyone. That's why I built Quintessential Coaching. Because success leaves clues. The highest performers think differently, they prepare differently, they make decisions differently. But most people are never taught how to build a great career. They're expected to figure it out on their own. We launched in early 2024, creating a world-class career coaching intelligence platform, and we continue to develop it with elite coaches, each one exceptional in their field. I have a simple vision, to build a curriculum around one truth. Your career doesn't happen to you, you build it. I know what it means to think big and start small, to back yourself when no one else does, to take risks, get it wrong, reset, and come back stronger. I'm Paul Quinn, I'm your career cornerman. Get ready, because we're just getting started. One of those most important moments of my life was when I was 8 and I became the fastest boy in first school. I had a really competitive lineup, but I can tell you, I wanted to win really badly, and my abiding memory was tying up my plimsolls. I've actually got a picture that my mum took. And I do think when you look back, if you have an early victory or victories when you're as a kid, they just carry through because you never really truly escape your childhood, right? So for me, becoming the fastest boy in first school was really the beginning to knowing what it was like to win, to taste victory, to understand what competition was. You know, to understand me, you've really got to understand where I came from, because my story is really my journey. So my mum moved from Singapore to the UK when she was 14, and she went from being very wealthy in Singapore and then to being very, very poor. And my dad moved to the UK when he was 16 from Ireland. And because they were not wealthy, we grew up in a migrant area called Southall, which was very close to Heathrow Airport. And just to give you an idea, there were 110 houses on the street, and there were only 2 non-brown families. There was a Jamaican family and my family. And needless to say, early on I learned in Southall there were 3 things that you needed to do well. You had to be able to talk fast, run fast, and use these fast. Unfortunately, I was good at all 3 of them, but I didn't really need to use the fisticuffs too often. And I learned in business and in life, you've got to think fast on your feet, and you've got to be able to talk and engage. And my time in Southall certainly provided that education. You know, looking out at this beautiful view, climbing these stairs, it just reminds me of my childhood. When I was 14, everything changed. My dad had a stroke, and up until then we had a great life. You know, my mum and dad took us on wonderful holidays. We just lived a wonderful life. My brother and I grew up as healthy young boys. But at 14, my dad had a stroke, and then everything changed. He fell ill. He was on the wrong medication actually for 2.5 years, so he was a grumpy, mean so-and-so. Growing up, working with my dad wasn't optional. My father was a hardcore, blue-collar Irish builder, and in our house, there were 3 rules. Rule number 1, you had to do your chores first. Dishes, cleaning, cooking, whatever needed doing. Rule 2, help dad. And by helping dad, it wasn't passing in a screwdriver. It was carrying scaffold boards, shifting thousands of bricks, digging, lifting, loading and unloading, rain or shine. Wet timber weighs a lot more than dry timber, and I learned that the hard way. And then rule 3, do your homework. Only when all of those 3 things were done could my brother and I go out and do what we really love, sport. And sport taught me lessons that no classroom ever could. Show up, do the work, stay disciplined, keep your word, and get back up when life knocks you down. As a former boxer, I learned very quickly that talent gets attention, but character earns respect. Although, if my dad was listening to this now, he'd probably say, "That's enough talking, son. There's a pile of bricks that need moving." He was a hell of a character. I loved my eclectic childhood, and I made some lifelong friends at every stage of my schooling journey, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But it was a really tough time, and you know what was difficult was my dad went from being the breadwinner to my mum becoming the breadwinner, and she was a chartered surveyor. She'd always worked, but all of a sudden we were a single income family and household, and I think it was really tough for my dad. But I can tell you this, I got my physical strength, my mental strength really largely from my father, because he was built like an ox. I mean, to give you an idea, his wedding ring is loose on my thumb. And I got so many gifts from my mother. She was the person I learned nearly everything from, and she to this day is still my hero. Unfortunately, they both passed on now. I wish they were here to see this part of my journey. So I've decided, because my mother-in-law is coming over, to do something a little bit different. So when I was younger, I learned how to cook. Basically all the key things that my mother would cook, which would be like a roast leg of lamb, things that were efficient, easy to cook, used in the oven. When I look back, one of those defining moments in my life, those seminal moments, was when I was 17. I was upstairs late on Friday night, always working hard, you know, doing my coursework, and my mum came into my bedroom and she had tears in her eyes, and I'd never seen her cry before. You know, she's a tough woman, you know, and she said to me, "Darling, you've got to get a job, otherwise we may lose the house." So on Monday morning, I went to a high street employment agency. I went there at 6:30 in the morning. It was right by South Harrow tube station. And I said, "Guys, do you have any jobs starting today that can pay me by the end of the week, please?" And they said, "Well, we've got a toilet cleaner job." And I think they said it half jokingly. And I said, "I'll take it, please." And they all started laughing. I said, "Why are you laughing?" They said, "Well, no one says please and thank you, especially when it comes to getting a job as a toilet cleaner." So I worked for 3 months in Hammersmith Hospital and in King Edward VII Hospital, which was then the Queen's Hospital, is now the King's Hospital. I went in to hand in my timesheet. We went into the office and the phones were ringing. So I picked up the phone thinking I'll help out. "Good morning, HMS Services, how can I help you?" And the manager of the office, Richard Gordon, said, "What the hell are you doing?" And I said, "Answering the telephone, you idiot, what does it look like?" And then he said, "Oh, you speak English?" I said, "Yeah, probably better than you do, mate." Because to be fair, most of the toilet cleaners were foreign refugees. So he asked me what my story was, and I told him, and he said, "Do you want to come and work in the office and do recruitment?" And I said, "What's recruitment?" And he told me, and I said, "Look, anything that gets me out of the latrine, yes please," because I was earning £2.80 an hour. But more important than that, whatever was going to get me paid. So if I was going to earn more money, you know, working in the toilet, that's exactly what I would do. But 31 years later, and I'm still in recruitment, and I'm still in contact with Richard Gordon. He's a great guy. You know, I moved to Singapore in 2001, and I've been working in this square mile, believe it or not, for 25 years. And in December 2001, 20 people got fired. I was one of those people. And in the employment contract, it said, if you left the country within a week, the company would pay for your economy class flight back to your home country. And 19 people left, went to the pub. I stayed in the office. I made over 50 calls and I secured 21 first interviews. And I'm really proud of that. And people often ask me, well, where did that grit and determination come from? The truth is, I didn't really have a choice. My flatmate was fired, which meant that my rent had doubled. My mum and dad were arriving in 10 days' time, so there was no choice. The most important day of my life, I'm laughing because I was just thinking just how crazy it is. Monday, the 3rd of the 3rd of the 3rd, was the day that I met my wife. But I'll share and unfold the story. So I had been working in a commission-only job. I was absolutely broke. I was spending $3.50 a day. That's what I was living off. I was living off 3 cans of tuna, $3.50 a day. And I had just got a job with an HR consultancy. Black Mountain was headquartered out of New York. It was a great firm. Anyway, as fate would have it, later on that evening, I met my beautiful wife-to-be, Tara Maria Davenport. You know what would make you laugh was after 2 weeks, I said to Tara, I'm gonna marry you. You know what she said? You're full of shit. And 23 years later, we're still together. We're coming up to our 20th wedding anniversary. So I wasn't wrong. Do you know what I'm saying? Cheers to that, man. So 2.5 years into my job with Black Mountain and my relationship with Tara, something interesting happened. I spoke to my regional director and I asked him how much the chairman of the company at the time made. And he said, he was disclosed that he earned $1 million last year. And I said, wow, $1 million. I want to earn $1 million. And he said to me, mate, you're never going to earn $1 million. And I said, what do you mean? I'm never going to earn $1 million. He goes, no. I said, why? And he said, well, look, Paul, you're great at opening doors, but you can't close doors. And I said to him, I can't close doors, and I've got like you behind me trying to close doors. So I resigned the next day. I didn't have a plan of action. I had a 3-month notice period. And I went back to go and work at the old search firm that I had initially worked at. And this time, you know, there was a clear plan of action. I said to the owner of the company, I want to become the general manager. I want to run Singapore, and ideally Hong Kong and London. And he said, well, you're not proven. I said, look, let me do this. I want you to pull together with the CFO every single company record that there is. The fastest deal, the smallest deal, the biggest deal, the slowest deal, the most number of candidates placed in a deal, the biggest month, the biggest quarter, the biggest year. And apart from this slowest deal, once I eviscerate every single flipping company record, you're gonna make me the GM. And I want to print each of those company records and I want them laminated and want to put on the wall. And of course he loved it because no one was bringing that kind of energy. And within 6 months, I eviscerated every single company record except for the slowest deal. And then I became the GM. And that was another step up for me. And I loved it because I got to lead front and center. I was the youngest guy in the company, but the people there believed in me. And it was the beginning of my journey as an entrepreneur. I knew what I was capable of. I've always believed in myself. And I went back to the goal-setting piece of paper on a yellow legal notepad that I wrote down when I was 18. And on that, my goals hadn't largely changed. I wanted to become a business owner, a millionaire before I turned 30. I wanted to get married and have my first child before I turned 30 because my dad was an older person. And I thought, you know what? This is it. I'm gonna go and set up my own company. I resigned the very next day. And then I thought, you know what? I've got 3 options. I could do this on my own. I could bring in investors, or I could go into business. And the person I really wanted to go into business with was Kush Ahmed. Now, Kush had been a friend of mine since 2001, one of my closest friends. So I invited him out for a romantic meal, shall we say. And I said, mate, listen, I want you to bring me into the business as a 50-50 owner. I got drunk, you know, a couple of bottles of wine. He doesn't drink because he's Muslim. And the next day he calls me up and goes, it was a good night last night. I said, it was a great night. He goes, I'm in. And I said, are you sure? He goes, yeah. He goes, do you remember everything we said? I said, no. But if you're in, you're in. That's it. And that was the beginning of our business relationship. What a journey it was. What are you saying, mate? What sword have you got behind you? What's that?
That's what you bought me.
It is. Let me see.
Yeah. And I think perhaps one of the things that at that time, you know, you were working with Black Mountain, and you know, it's not always nice working for other companies, especially when you're as driven as somebody like you.
You know, the funny thing about our relationship is we'd always take the piss out of each other in a friendly way. And I know, I've got to tell you this now, I learn more from you than anyone else, by 10 times.
And because you and I were probably talking almost on a daily basis, just as great friends,
Yeah.
you know, we were meeting and I was saying, Paul, this has come through, you know, all these deals were coming through. And you were like, oh my God, that's phenomenal. And I can see this kind of spark in your eyes.
Really?
And yeah, of course.
So in 2005, I became part of the business with Kush, 50-50 owner in Nicest International Search, which is now Westport Partners, is effectively the same company. But it was the beginning of a really hard period in my life, because what happened was Tara's dad died very, very suddenly. And I just set up the business, and put it like this, we couldn't afford to put a tombstone on his grave, believe it or not, for 7 months. We got married in 2006, and it was tough because we had to pay for all the hospital costs of her dad being in hospital for all those months. We had to pay for the wedding. So Tara and I paid for the wedding, and we had a beautiful wedding in Bali, and we flew my parents in. Obviously they didn't have any money, so we paid for all of that. So I wouldn't say on a shoestring budget, but we had costs. Then that was my involvement in the shipping business. And then Caden was born. At the end of 2006, he was premature and he was in hospital for 3 months, and the hospital bills were a staggering $56,000. And where I lost my hair was thinning anyway, you can see from my wedding pictures, but unfortunately Caden was in hospital, my son, for the first 3 months of his life, and it was a little bit touch and go. And this is where I saw really just how much of a superwoman my wife is, and how most women are. And she handled it with such grace and dignity. We spent every night in the hospital with Caden, but there was a period of about 2 weeks where I felt really sick, I think just from worry. You know, it's crazy when I think becoming a dad completely changed everything, meaning my wife gave me a reason to be the best version of myself. But becoming a parent, becoming a dad, gave me a reason to be the best person I could be for my family. And I'm truly blessed. 3 beautiful kids and an amazing wife. Now, if you look at my son, he's a fine young man. He's over 6'1". I'm 5'6.5", so he towers above me. He's an amateur boxer, part-time model, and he's now completing his 2nd year of national service. He's an aspiring filmmaker, and I'm so, so proud of him. And I've got 2 beautiful daughters. Talia, she's a great sportswoman, feisty, reminds me a lot of me, which means we have a lot of back and forth. And she's a fantastic basketballer. And my youngest daughter, Vanna, she's the dance and the fashion icon of the house. And if you can imagine, she's only 11. They both bully me, and they keep me on my toes every single day. Quite frankly, if it wasn't for all those other issues, things went really well with the business, and we did phenomenally well in the first few years and never really looked back until the global financial crisis. And that's when everything changed again. So there was one period of real intensity during the global financial crisis where Kush hadn't built for 6 months, I hadn't built for 6 months, none of the consultants had built for 6 months. And I think he got to that point where he just said, this isn't for me anymore. And he said to me one day, I'm thinking of leaving. And I said, for real? And you got to understand, I was heartbroken because you're not just losing your business partner, but you're losing your best mate that you see every day. So he moved out. Within a 2-hour conversation of that, I cut him a check and brought him out of the business. We had to move out of the office because the service office we were in went bankrupt. Sorry? Oh, you finished? Finished, got to get off. Just got kicked off the tram, end of the line. But I'll continue my story. So, bought Kush out. Might as well slow down here, bro. Had to change office because the service office that I was in went bankrupt. So my cost of staff doubled. My office rent more than doubled. And this is the real defining moment in my career in many ways. We hadn't billed now for quite some time, and I've just felt with my staff, they'd given up. And I put them at ease. I said, listen, you can take a 2 to 4 week sabbatical. It's at the end of the year. I want you to come back. If you're going to come back, you've got to come back and you've got to fight. And that's the one thing about me is I'm a fighter. You know, I've never got knocked down, and even if I did, I'd get back up again. And that month, I billed $997,000. And you know what I thought to myself was, why couldn't it have been $1 million? I was that livid. I wanted it so badly. And you know what, coming to the office on my own every day for 4 weeks when no one else was in the office, it just reminded me about what I was all about. Grit, hustle, determination. It brought me back to my days on the track, boxing. And even though you've got people in your corner, the reality is you're the one getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and running when no one else is. Christmas Day, you're the one putting in the work. And I didn't call anyone, I didn't tell anyone about it, not my mum, not my dad. My wife knew about it, and that was a defining moment. And look, the reality was we were always going to be okay, because I only pay myself once a year, so we had enough money in the bank. But you don't want to work for a year and be making less than you would do if you worked at McDonald's, do you know what I mean? So anyway, we keep rocking and rolling, and it's part of my journey, part of my story. After my dad died, right, which was just a life-changing moment for me, I said to my wife, I said, honey, I think we're going to go and live in America. And it's always been my dream, and I never really thought about it until just now. So we took an amazing 4-week holiday, arguably the best holiday of my life. We started off in New York, and the goal was to look at all the universities where I thought my wife could do a PhD. You know, she gave me the list. So NYU, New York. We then went up to New Haven, Yale. And then we went to DC just to check it out. But then we went to Virginia, Charlottesville, and then we were in Miami and Orlando, and then LA, San Francisco. And what was clear to me was I absolutely love the US. I love the mentality. So my wife, amazingly, won a Fulbright scholarship. And then she got into Yale to do a master's and then subsequently a PhD or JSD. And we moved to Westport, Connecticut. And it was the best time of my life. I absolutely adored every moment. And partly because our beautiful third child, Ivana, was born there. And what was amazing was I got the opportunity that I didn't have in Singapore, which was to take the kids to school, collect them from school. I got to go to the gym in the morning because I was working the night shift. I was working Asian hours from America. So basically, roughly from 7:30 p.m. in the evening in the US till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. But I tell you what a great place, what a great set of people. We made lifelong friends with some of our neighbors. And yeah, Westport, Connecticut, one of my favorite places on planet Earth.
Can I start now?
You know, a few years ago, I got to a very serious inflection point, and I'd probably hit a little bit of depression. I didn't know what to do. And I came across an amazing man called Patrick Bet-David online. And I thought, you know what? I'm gonna go to his conference. And the fact that it was in Miami was brilliant. At this time I was living back in Singapore. So I went to his conference and he set all of this homework. And I pulled together off the back of it when I came back to Singapore. I spent a whole week thinking about my life, my family, my priorities. And I pulled together a 110 page PowerPoint presentation, really just for me. And I created the concept of going online with the career coaching platform. And then why I decided to come up with a podcast was two of my favorite actors, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, acted in a scene in Heat. And part of my vision board, I created two as part of the homework with Patrick Bet-David, was me interviewing De Niro and Pacino, right? And I visualized myself at that table in the movie Heat. And I thought, you know what? A podcast would be brilliant. It would make me a center of excellence in what I did in the world of private banking as a career coach, but would give me the opportunity to speak to some truly amazing human beings. Fast forward to today, 2 years later, we're now in the top 15% of video podcasts, amazingly, on Spotify globally. So now, today, we're just on the verge of relaunching our brand new online platform for Quintessential Coaching. It's going to help people navigate their careers, and it's going to continue to have multiple coaches on, and I'm just super excited. I'm super pumped for what the future holds. So my business now looks like I've got Westport Partners, the executive search business, Quintessential Coaching, which is the career coaching business, and Quintessential Questions, the podcast, and they're all inextricably linked. And I can't wait to share this journey with all of you. You know, I've now done a podcast with the amazing Jim Lampley in his home state of North Carolina. We've hosted 4 Olympians and multiple world record holders on the podcast. You know, I've advised leaders at the highest level, and I've coached people at their lowest. So now I'm ready to build something truly amazing. I'm ready to build Quintessential Coaching into a multi-million-dollar business, continue to run Westport Partners at that level too. And Quintessential Question podcast, I want it to be an entity in its own right. So my journey now is to take people to that threshold where they're earning $1 million ideally, and to help them elevate their career. And I'm super pumped and excited to help as many people around the world achieve their career goals. Get ready for the journey.